Hello, my name is Beth Small, and I'm a lecturer with the IIRP. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Restorative Practices Continuum and the Social Discipline Window, and I'm going to focus specifically on the Restorative Conference. So many of you have seen the Restorative Practices Continuum before. We move from the left to the right, starting with the informal, affective statements, questions, small impromptu conversations, circles, and then the formal conference. Today, I'm going to focus specifically on the formal conference. You'll also note on the slide, we often talk about the continuum being 80% proactive and 20% responsive. So 80% of our interaction should be community building, opportunities for us to build social capital, so that when things go wrong, we've already established that social capital and we can work together to repair that harm. So this is that 20% responsive that we will focus on. And the 20% responsive does not just mean conferences. It can be affective statements and questions, small impromptu conversations and circles, but the very formal conference does require a lot more planning. It's a lot more time and more people will be involved. You'll also notice as you read through one of your handouts of the facilitator's script for the conference, you'll notice the affective questions there. So as we move through down this continuum, we're taking the affective statements and questions with us as the basis for the formal conference. So the social discipline window, again, this is something you've probably seen before. We are on two different axes here. So we talk about low to high control, expectations, limit setting, and then low to high support, encouragement, and nurturing. And when we are high on both, we fall into that restorative practices window, right? The with box. So the restorative conference, quite honestly, can fall in all four of these boxes. And we want to be really careful when we're prepping conferences, when we're talking to people and we're starting to move down the road to have a conference, that it's being presented in a way that sets limits and expectation, but also provides support and encouragement. So for an example, a punitive way to have a conference is to say, is to kind of force someone into it and be really coercive and not be collaborative. I've run into this sometimes when I worked with juvenile court. So there would be times when a judge or a probation officer would order a restorative conference to happen. And if the parties are not interested or they don't want to do it, they don't have to. This really is a voluntary process. So we want to just be cautious of that. Even if the system is coming at this from a punitive lens, or if the system is perceived to be punitive, it doesn't mean that the process still can't be restorative. Another way where a conference could not be restorative and fall more into the permissive box is if it's done in a very tokenistic way. Like, let's just go through the motions, let's pull all these folks together. If you don't have a very strong agreement and you're not, again, setting those high limits and expectations for behavior change. The conference could also fall into that not box or the neglectful box, where the process is, again, maybe put together very quickly and not followed through with. So maybe there was a great agreement, but no one there to follow through to make sure that the person who created harm was actually held accountable. So again, when we're thinking about conferences and we're thinking about ways to use them, there does need to be a level of both control and expectations, along with support and encouragement and nurturing. I think it's also important to remember that a conference could be the consequence, right? The natural consequence of an issue, or it may be coupled with something else. So there's been a lot of times when I've run conferences with school where there still was a suspension or a detention. It doesn't take away that code of conduct. There may be things in your setting that are suspendable offenses. Maybe it's bringing drugs or weapons to school. Or again, if I go back to some of those examples of juvenile court, where a young person may be involved in the juvenile justice system. So there still may be an external consequence. The conference itself is really about reconnecting and repairing the harm and giving the person who was harmed an opportunity to talk about what that was like for them. And if the person who created the harm also gets something out of that, that's extra, right? That's a little bit, that's like icing on the cake. So the conference itself, again, in that when we're looking at it through the with box, is an opportunity to bring people who've been impacted by others' behavior with the folks who created that behavior, and have them have a meaningful exchange to hopefully move past it, repair the relationship, or possibly even build the relationship even stronger.